Hello and welcome. In this video, I wanted to take a look at an interesting 1000 Sun list that I saw that placed rather well within a tournament. As always, do remember just because this is a tournament list does not mean that it cannot be fun within a casual setting as well. With that being said, let's take a look at how this list performed. This list placed first place out of 15 players at the Ragnarok Hobbies ITC on September 17, 2022, which was held in the United Kingdom. And this list does do some unique things for a 1000 Sun list, though I will say, for the most part, it's somewhat generic, so don't expect too many exciting things. However, there are a few things to take note of, and we'll cover those as we go along. Anyway, with that being said, let's dive right into the list. This list begins with a battalion detachment composed of the Cult of Time, and if you're interested in learning what the cults do, please check out my video linked in the descriptions below, which covers all of the different cults for the 1000 Suns. However, the quick rundown is, each cult provides the members of that cult a unique psychic power, access to a special relic, and a special trait if they so desire. In any case, let's see what this battalion detachment includes. This battalion detachment begins off with an Armon, who supplies a detachment with 3 Cabal points, though I will mention that this Armon does not happen to have a disc, which is rather surprising as a disc is usually a popular choice due to the mobility that it offers. However, there are situations where you don't necessarily need it, so it's not necessarily a wrong choice to exclude it from the war gear selection that you've chosen to go with. In any case, Armon is a rather powerful psyker, being able to cast 3 powers and deny 3 powers within a turn. He also knows 3 powers, in addition to the psychic power known as Smite and the cult power which all units who can cast psychic powers know within the army. He is a lord of the 1k Suns, so he does get the generic aura in that sense, and he has all the other good stuff that comes standard on Chaos Space Marines and 1000 Suns units. He does have a special ability in addition to that known as Arc Sorcerer of Tzeentch, which says he can roll the psychic test each time a psychic test is taken. This is a very powerful ability that gives him so much more consistency when taking those psychic tests. All in all, I'll say Armon is one of the strongest sorcerers within the game, considering his different stat lines and his different abilities to cast psychic powers. However, he is a little bit expensive at 160 points, rivaling that of a Demon Prince, but that's not to say he's overpriced, rather it's to say that you should consider if you want to include him over other options, considering his price, though in lists where he is included, he will perform rather well. So what psychic powers has this Armon been given? The first of those 3 psychic powers is the Glamour of Tzeentch, which when successfully manifested, gives -1 to hit to enemies targeting a select unit within 18 inches of the caster. The second psychic power is Presage, which gives +1 to hit for a friendly unit within 18 inches of the caster when successfully manifested. And finally, the third and last power is Weaver of Fates. Weaver of Fates is a very powerful psychic power, which gives a selected friendly unit within 18 inches a 4+ invulnerable save. This can definitely take some units over the top, and this psychic power can make some squish units incredibly durable within the game. As you can see, Armon has been given a variety of different powers, which give him both offensive and defensive capabilities, though generally these powers are more of a support psychic powers. He has not been given any traits or relics, and he has been kept rather standard in terms of the allocation of what he has been offered. So while he's no slouch within offensive capabilities, he definitely seems like a bit of a more support character within this list in specific. In any case, with that being said, we've covered Armon completely, and we can move on to our second HQ choice. The second HQ choice within this battalion detachment is an Exalted Sorcerer. Like Armon, the Exalted Sorcerer offers 3 Cabal points. However, he can only cast 2 powers, deny 1 psychic power, and only knows 2 powers in addition to the standard powers that all psychers know, and he has been armed with an Infernal Bolt Pistol as well as a Prosper and Kopesh. In addition to this, he has been given a trait and a relic. The trait that this Exalted Sorcerer knows is known as Immaterial Echo, and Immaterial Echo is a unique trait for the Cult of Time. This trait says that if the bearer manifests a psychic power with a 9+, they can manifest an additional power, and if the additional power is successfully manifested, it cannot be denied within this turn. This is not the most exciting trait as it requires a lot of things to go your way. However, in this situation, this trait has been coupled with a specific relic known as Athenian Scrolls. The Athenian Scrolls are an Exalted Sorcerer only relic, and it says when the bearer manifests a Tzeentch Disciple psychic power, once per game you can mark that power so that each time they manifest that power for the rest of the game, they can roll an additional d6 for the test, and then they discard one of the d6s rolled for that test. And as such, when you combine these two, you do get a much more consistent ability to roll that 9+ check as you're rolling 3 dice and discarding whichever one you please. This is a good little bit of synergy between this relic and trait, and does give you a little bit more ability to successfully manifest those powers, as well as all of the Kabbalistic rituals that you can play in addition to this, giving you the ability to consistently activate that Warlord trait. And speaking of psychic powers, let's take a look at the psychic powers that this Exalted Sorcerer knows, in addition to the standard powers that all psychers know. The first of those two psychic powers that he knows is the Tzeentch's Firestorm. This psychic power says, when the psychic power is successfully manifested, you select an enemy unit within 18 inches, and you roll 9d6s, and for each 6 rolled this way, they suffer 1 mortal wound. However, if you pass a psychic check with a non-modified 9+, that unit suffers mortal wounds on 5+ instead of just a roll of 6. This once again ties in really well with that relic that allows you to mark a psychic power and roll an additional dice so that you can more consistently generate that 9+ result and then allow yourself to cast an additional psychic power that cannot be denied off of that Warlord trait. For the second psychic power that the Exalted Sorcerer knows, the second psychic power is the Baleful De-Evolution. This psychic power says that you select an enemy unit within 18 inches that contains 6 or more models, and you roll a number of d6 equal to the psychic test, and for each roll of 6 that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. You'll on average generate 1 to 2 d3 mortal wounds, and that's rather nice. Once again, the psychic power couples rather well with the Scroll's relic, and shows how you can kind of utilize some of these abilities in conjunction to one another to really make a nice offensive character that can put out a lot of damage, thanks to your ability to stack different relics and traits, as well as psychic powers to give yourself the optimal output. That being said, do keep in mind that in most cases you'll have to have an enemy visible and within 18 inches in order to use these different psychic powers. In addition to that, this Exalted Sorcerer does not appear to have been given a disc, so he is going to be a little bit slower and he is going to be a little more reliant on being protected by different units within the army. However, the Thousand Suns do have a lot of durability and can survive things rather well, so I do think this is an interesting type of character that can be very efficient within a Thousand Suns list that benefits rather well from the Grey Cult that he is within, showing that there is a little bit space for the Cult of Time to perform, even though the Cult of Duplicity generally tends to have a little bit of a stronger game plan due to their innate psychic power being so incredibly powerful. Moving on to the third and final HQ choice within this battalion detachment, this HQ choice is an Infernal Master, which generates 2 Cabal points and is a rather popular HQ choice. And if you're interested in learning more about the Cabal Master, do check out my 500 point list video for the Thousand Suns, also linked in the description below, as in that video I go over the Infernal Master in much more detail than I will be in this video. In any case, this Infernal Master has been given a relic, and that relic is an Umbralific Crystal. The Umbralific Crystal is a very powerful relic which allows the bearer of this relic to select himself or a unit within 6 inches of the bearer, and that unit gets redeployed anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from any enemy units. Anytime you see a relic such as this, whether it be the Veil of Darkness in the Necron Forces or the Solar Flare for the Adeptus Mechanicus, do keep in mind that that relic is going to be very powerful, as it gives you an incredible ability to control the battlefield and move around units at a much faster pace than you would normally be able to do so. Especially when you consider an army like the Thousand Suns, which have incredibly durable units that you can teleport within a specific location and bunker down until other units reach them in order to support that unit. I do think this is one of those relics that you're probably going to want to include within most armies, and I do like that the Thousand Suns have an ability to gain access to this kind of ability without necessarily having to be within the Cult of Duplicity, though I do think being able to deal with 2 units within a turn is also very powerful. In any case, I do think this is a relic you're going to see in the majority of lists, if they're not a Cult of Duplicity list, or if you want to move around units on the tabletop very efficiently. The Infernal Master does know a psychic power which is Empiric Guidance, and this says he can select a friendly unit within 12 inches, and that unit gains plus 6 inches to the rapid fire weapons and heavy weapons. This is a very popular psychic power and one that you'll see very often, as the majority of weapons within the Thousand Suns are going to be rapid fire and heavy weapons. In fact, I think pretty much all of the relevant ones are, so in most cases it's pretty much going to read that all of your weapons gain an additional 6 inches of range, which can really help when you consider that the Thousand Suns armies are going to be rather small in size due to their elite nature. As such, being able to give a powerful squad the ability to have a little more reach and a little more effective range on the tabletop is always going to be a powerful ability. And as for the 2 Infernal Pacts that the Infernal Master is allowed to know, the first of those is Glimpse of Eternity, which gives you 1 reroll until your next command phase, and rerolls are always nice to have as many times players will spend command points on them, and command points are a very valuable resource. The second Infernal Pact is the Malefic Maelstrom. This says that a friendly unit within 24 inches gains +1 strength to range attacks until your next command phase. This can definitely help you overcome certain breakpoints with your different range weapons, and when coupled with that Empiric Guidance is definitely a great way to give some of your range firepower that much more effective capability of taking out enemy units. I think the Infernal Master is definitely a very powerful unit, and at the price point that he comes in at, he's definitely something you should consider for most of your lists, as he does bring enough to the table to be very justifiable within most situations. With the HQ choices covered, we can move on to the troop choices for this battalion attachment. The troop choices for the battalion attachment begin with 4 units of 5 Rubric Marines each. Each of these Rubric Marine units have an Icon of Flame and a Plasma Pistol on the Aspiring Sorcerer, as those upgrades are free and pretty much should be taken in each case. The Icon of Flame does bring each of these units up to 2 Cabal points, and the Plasma Pistol is just a nice little bonus when it comes to shooting. The differences between these units is that the first unit has a Soul Reaper cannon, whereas all of the other units have their basic armaments and no other upgrades. In addition to that, the psychic powers are different on the different units, so let's take a look at those different psychic powers. The first unit's psychic power, which includes the Soul Reaper cannon, has the Doombolt psychic power on their Aspiring Sorcerer. The Doombolt psychic power is rather basic in nature, and essentially serves as a better smite, meaning that this is definitely an offensive focused unit, which does make sense due to their increased war gear allocation. The second unit of Rubric Marines has the Tzeentch Firestorm, which we've covered already, and the third unit has the Desecration of Worlds. The Desecration of Worlds allows them to select an enemy unit within 24 inches, and if the power is successfully manifested until your next psychic phase, each time the selected unit makes a move, advance, fall back, or charge move, they roll 1d6 for each model in that unit, and for each 6 rolled, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. This is definitely a very powerful utility ability, as it can kind of lock down an enemy unit, or force them to potentially take mortal wounds if they desire to move at all. If you target a larger unit, you can definitely generate a few mortal wounds each time the psychic power is activated, so it can definitely be a bit awkward for certain opponents. In other cases, the psychic power might serve no purpose at all, as there can be situations where the enemy has very small units and they get lucky on their rolls, or it's going to be a situation where they don't really have to move their units to be effective. In either case, it's definitely a nice little psychic power to throw on one of your units and then have that unit be a bit of a utility unit in certain games, where it's going to be very effective, and in other games, it's just a basic unit with a psychic power that can sometimes do a little bit of damage here and there. The fourth and final Rubric Marine unit has the Temporal Surge psychic power, which allows them to select a unit within 6 inches, and that unit can make a normal move. It's always nice to have a little bit of extra mobility, and I think this is a perfectly fine psychic power to include within a unit as a utility option. And with the 4 Rubric Marine units covered, we come to the last troop choice within this army, being a unit of Zangors. This unit of Zangors is composed of 10 Zangors, all armed with the Zangor blades, and this is a rather standard filler pick for an army such as this. Oftentimes you'll see this role filled by cultists, but in this situation, the Zangors were chosen most likely due to the models being available, as they do come within that combat patrol, in addition to Infernal Master and other units included in this list. They're a perfectly fine distraction unit that can fill its role rather successfully, so there's no shame in taking them onto the battlefield, though as we'll see later, there are certain point constraints within this list that I do think should have been a little more addressed. With the troop choices being covered, we can move on to the lead choices. The lead choice is composed of 2 different units, the first of those units being a unit of 5 Scarab-Occult Terminators. The Scarab-Occult Terminators have been armed with a Hellfire Missile Rack and a single Soul Reaper Cannon, which is a rather standard allocation of war gear for a Terminator unit. The Scarab-Occult Sorcerer, which is the champion of the unit, has been given a Legion command known as Ardent Automata. This allows the unit to shoot and still perform an action within the same turn. In addition to that, the psychic power that the Occult Sorcerer knows is known as Cacodemic Curse. This psychic power allows him to select an enemy unit within 18 inches if the psychic power is successfully manifested, and that unit gains -1 strength to the ranged weapons. Definitely a nice little ability to reduce some of the output of your enemy, and can definitely make it rather hard for your enemy to take out some of your tougher units. Now the second elite choice is a little bit more strange in my opinion, though I can understand why this is the case for this unit. The second unit is composed of 9 Scarab-Occult Terminators, being given a single Hellfire Missile Rack and a single Soul Reaper Cannon. What's a little strange about this unit is that it's only 9 Terminators instead of 10 Terminators being armed with 2 Hellfire Missile Racks and 2 Soul Reaper Cannons. I do understand that sometimes there's a point limitation and you have to make do with smaller units. However, I do think this list could have really benefited from finding a few points here and there and building up this unit of Scarab-Occult Terminators up to a unit of 10 and giving them that second allocation of war gear options. However, that being said, the list did come in first place, so who am I really to criticize it that much, considering that the player probably knew why they were making this choice and made it intentionally as opposed to kind of going with whatever they had, considering that if you probably have 9 Terminators, you probably have an additional one somewhere as they come in boxes of 5, so there isn't really a model limitation in that sense either. In any case, that's just something I noticed that was a little weird, so let's continue with this unit of Terminators. The Scarab Occult Sorcerer in this unit has been given the Legion command, known as the Rites of Coalescence, which allows him to heal a model to full wounds every single turn. This is a rather good ability for the price within a unit such as this, considering how durable the Thousand Suns Terminators can be. And one other thing to mention is it couples rather well with the Cult of Time, which can resurrect models within a unit, meaning this unit is going to be very hard to destroy. In addition to that, this unit is rather effective with that crystal teleportation, so that it can be positioned in a critical spot and pretty much stand there and be very durable in various games. As for the psychic power on the Occult Sorcerer, the Occult Sorcerer has been given a Twist of Fate psychic power, which when successfully manifested allows him to select an enemy unit within 12 inches, and that unit cannot benefit from invulnerable saves. And that's another reason why I would have liked to see an additional Terminator and an additional Hellfire Missile Rack, as well as a Soul Reaper cannon, as this unit can teleport into a location, strip away the invulnerable save, and then put out a decent amount of firepower with its different weapons. That being said, once again, it's not the end of the world, however it's definitely a preference I would have gone with in my situation. And finally, this Battalion detachment concludes with one fast attack choice, being a unit of 5 Chaos Spawn. As mentioned in the 500 point list video, the Chaos Spawn are definitely a decent enough unit within most Chaos forces and do see occasional play within other Chaos armies. However, within the Thousand Suns, due to their access to special stratagems that benefit the Chaos Spawn, as well as their ability to make units very durable, such as the Chaos Spawn, it does take the Chaos Spawn to a different level within the Thousand Sun forces, giving you the ability to take 5 of them within a unit and having a very successful unit that is actually rather low in points. However, do consider that when you buff a unit of Chaos Spawn with your different stratagems and different psychic powers, those are command points and psychic powers that are going to the Chaos Spawn and not other units within your army, so it's definitely something to be aware of, as sometimes you can leave yourself vulnerable in other ways, even though you can make that unit of Chaos Spawn very effective. That's why not every single list includes the Chaos Spawn, but a lot of lists do include a unit of 5 of them, or do include 1 or 2 just as objective units that can just be kind of a nuisance on the tabletop and can be rather effective for the low points cost. In either case, it's something that's up to a player if they want to include a unit of 5 of them, or go with other choices within the Thousand Suns army. In either case, I personally like them, and I definitely understand the inclusion of them within this list, as they're a very potent melee unit, and we can see by the different psychic powers within previous units that these Chaos Spawn can be very effective. Now that we've covered the Battalion detachment for this list, we can get to kind of the exciting part of this list. This list concludes with one final detachment, being a Supreme Command detachment. In this case, this Supreme Command detachment is composed of a single model, being the Demon Primarch known as Magnus the Red. And Magnus the Red is a very powerful model coming in at 420 points, with an addition of 4 Cabal points being generated from him alone. Let's take a quick look at the stat line of Magnus the Red. He definitely has a very fast movement speed at 16 inches, though that does decay down to 12 inches as his wounds drop throughout the course of the game. In addition to that, he does have a little bit of a fragile body with only a toughness of 7, 18 wounds, and a 3+ normal save, though he does at least have a 4+ invulnerable save thanks to being a Demon Primarch. That definitely gives him a rather fragile body, and your opponents are going to be able to take advantage of that to some extent. And don't forget, if they have any way of ignoring invulnerable saves, you're definitely going to be in a lot of pain, considering that they're going to be able to put out a lot of damage onto Magnus rather quickly and chip away at those 18 wounds, considering how large of a model he is. Magnus the Red is a very powerful glass cannon in terms of psychic powers. However, he's no slouch within melee combat either, having 8 attacks total with a 2+ weapon skill at a strength of 16 due to his special weapons, 4 armor penetration, and D3 damage. In addition to that, he inflicts D3 additional mortal wounds at the end of combat if he damages but does not kill a model within combat. That definitely allows him to put out quite a lot of damage in melee combat in addition to his different psychic abilities. On top of that, as a Demon Primarch, he does gain the benefit of having 3 different Warlord traits for the price of 1. In this case, the list has given him his Warlord trait, as you should in most cases, considering how much you get for that 1 command point. The 3 different traits that he gains for that single command point are Arrogance of Aeons, which allows you to roll the Deny test, as well as allowing him to benefit from an additional Kabbalistic ritual within a given turn. He also gains the Undying Form, which reduces damage taken by 1 to a minimum of 1, which is always nice to have, as it does give him a little bit more durability. However, considering his rather low toughness and the lack of a feel no pain, as well as his somewhat weak save profile, it's definitely possible to target him with rather light weapons fire and still be rather effective even with the Undying Form in consideration. Finally, the third and last warlord trait that he has access to is Lord of Forbidden Knowledge. And Lord of Forbidden Knowledge says that he knows all psychic powers from the disciplines of Tzeentch. This means he has access to any psychic powers that he so desires from the Thousand Sons Codex. And in terms of psychic powers, he can cast 3 different powers a turn, and he can attempt to deny 3 psychic powers. However, before we get into the psychic powers, let's take a look at what other special abilities he has. Being the Primarch of the Thousand Sons, Magnus has the Primarch of the Thousand Sons Aura ability, which says core units within 6 inches reroll hit rolls of 1. This is a rather standard ability and something you'll see on most units such as this. In addition to that, he has Lord of the Planet of Sorcerers, which allows him to select a core or character unit within 6 inches of himself, and until your next command phase, the models in that unit can reroll their hit roll as a whole. So it does give him a little bit more ability to make some of the units that he's supporting even more accurate. Now, moving on to the next ability, he has Crown of the Crimson King, where his 4+ invulnerable save comes from, but it also means he never suffers Perils of the Warp when making psychic checks, which can be rather relevant because once again, he does have a little bit of a low durability profile. And finally, he has 2 abilities that contribute to his psychic powers even further. The first one being Gaze of Magnus, which means that when he casts the Smite psychic power, he generates d6 mortal wounds for a basic smite, and if he passes with a test of 11+, he generates 3d3 mortal wounds instead. This definitely does make him much more effective when casting that Smite psychic power. And finally, the last special ability that he has is Unearthly Power. Unearthly Power allows him to roll a psychic test, and it adds 1 to his psychic test as well as his denied checks. However, this is increased adding 2 if Magnus has 10 or more wounds, which means most of the time he's probably going to have a +2 to both his psychic test and his deny test. This definitely makes him very consistent and very powerful when making different psychic checks as well as denying enemy psychic powers. That being said though, with all of that in mind, he is a very fragile unit and he is very much a glass cannon. In addition to that, compare him to something like Armon, who only costs 160 points and brings some similarities to the table with his ability to cast psychic powers and deny psychic powers. So while Armon isn't anywhere as powerful as Magnus himself, Armon definitely does cost a lot less, and that's why you'll generally see Armon in more lists than you'll see Magnus. That being said, Magnus shouldn't be discounted as he can do a lot of work within a game. However, if your opponent can take advantage of him and take him out before he really has a chance to take control of the game, you're definitely going to be feeling a lot of pain considering how fragile he is compared to other characters within the game at this time. I really wish Magnus had something like Gazgul Thraka does, or the Catan Shards, where he's limited to the number of wounds he can take within a certain phase, as that would still keep him rather fragile, as players with enough damage types can still take him down within a given turn. However, it would make them work a little more to take him down, because as it stands now, it's very easy to take out a Magnus, so it definitely takes a lot of skill from a player to be able to keep a Magnus around long enough for him really to make an impact on the game that's worth those 400+ points. I will mention one other thing is to keep in mind that this was only a 15-player tournament, so it's not necessarily a massive tournament where you would have a lot of different players and you would have a lot of different rounds that you would have to go through, and as such you would be more likely to encounter situations where a player could take advantage of you including Magnus within your list. However, with that being said, do keep in mind that most tournaments are rather small, and do keep in mind that most tournaments are not going to be incredibly cutthroat, so you're generally going to be able to bring a list like this to both a casual game and a tournament game and still have a lot of fun in most situations unless you're really trying for the top spot in a very large event where the competition is going to be much harder. I'll also say that just because this was a smaller tournament does not mean this was a weaker tournament, as those 15 players could have been very powerful. It's just less likely to be the case than a tournament where you have 40+ people and you have some very big names within that tournament. In either case, I do think this is a very interesting list and does bring 18 Cabal points on that Battalion detachment as well as an additional 4 Cabal points on the Magnus the Red, so it definitely has access to a lot of abilities that are unique to the Thousand Sons and really does make use of what makes the Thousand Sons very powerful. So with that being said, let me know in the comments below, do you like this kind of list or do you prefer a more generic one without the inclusion of Magnus the Red? Or do you have a different way of playing the Thousand Sons, as I do think there are more ways of playing it. However, with the Thousand Sons being kind of a smaller sub-faction, I do think you'll see a lot of lists kind of do boil down to those Rubric Marines and those Scarabocult Terminators. And while some people might find that as a bit of a boring style of play, it does give you some ability to kind of make the most out of your models, considering that those Rubrics and those Scarabocult Terminators are going to be rather good as time goes on, and you're not going to have to invest too much money in your army as time goes on, thus giving you the ability to make a little more efficient use of some of your money spent on that army. I will also say with some of the demon changes that occurred recently, there have been a lot more demons included within Thousand Sun lists, and I would like to take a look at one of those list types in the future once I better understand the new demons that the Thousand Suns have access to. And don't forget, you can always soup Thousand Suns with other Chaos Forces for great effect, even though you lose out on some of the unique things that the Thousand Suns have to offer. In either case, let me know in the comments down below what you think about how the Chaos armies are shaping up, and what kind of armies you think are really interesting within the current meta, as well as if you're a casual player, what do you think of a list like this? Anyways, as always, thank you for watching, and as always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons. You guys are really awesome people and really do help support the channel. In addition to that, I would like to say, if you know anyone who may benefit from this content, please do share this video with them, as it not only helps the channel, but it also helps them out as well. And if you've enjoyed the content, do subscribe and like for future videos from this channel. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.